Good evening, everyone. This is the Bowman podcast coming at you here. We got a very special guest today. We got Amy from Amy's Animal Art and Taxidermy down there in North Carolina. Say hi to everyone. Wave.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're honored to have you on and talk about taxidermy and all things of what we can do afterwards after we find some great animals. But first, we're going to jump into some intros here. We got Mr. Troy Forrester, Greenlight Outdoors.
What's going
Okay.
on?
Say hi. All decked out in prime.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it. Like it. We got Mr. Cedric O'Hara back, almost ready to go on duty again.
Right. That's right. Sadly.
Some hot new branding too. I like it.
Yeah, dude. Pumped about it. Absolutely pumped about it.
Looks nice. Getting good traction pretty quick, huh?
Yeah, dude. It's we can talk about that in a little bit, but things are really going well for us.
Great.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. All right. And then Mr. Josh Miller, the one, the only, triple point broadheads, best in the game. Just came back from South Africa. So another reason why we got me on.
Yeah.
Talk South Africa.
A lot of taxidermy needs done. A lot of taxidermy.
I just finished up a big African safari I'm working on right now.
Oh,
It's
wow.
22 pieces.
Wow.
How many pieces?
22?
22 pieces, including a giraffe shoulder mounts. I love doing giraffes.
Wow.
Wow.
You have to have a big space to do a giraffe.
Yeah, we don't do the whole body usually, just the head and shoulders, but just that sits about 10 to 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Now, is that a custom foam that you have to use? You have to build that, or do they have them that you can get and then shave it down? Is it something you have to build?
Fortunately, they do sell those for adult giraffes. Now, I did a newborn giraffe. It died at a zoo, and they don't make much for that. So I made that from scratch.
Okay.
Awesome.
I'm just glad that she had in there. It's a newborn giraffe that died at a zoo, which is
I
billions.
say that. You would not believe how many people
No, I believe
went
it.
out and hunted them.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah.
I was just joking.
I guess they're a little bit of a touchy subject sometimes, but hey, that's awesome. They're beautiful, and I know your work is awesome. So we're glad to have you on. So what's going on there, Troy? What do you got in your hand?
So tonight my wife and daughter had to go to soccer practice, took the 3-month-old with them. So it was me and my 2.5-year-old boy here at the house, and for once he crashed out early. He was out. I didn't know what to do with myself, so I decided to sneak outside and shoot a little bit. Went live on Instagram, like normal people do, and started shooting, messing around, and I tore up one of these Halo Knox. But the coolest part is it still works.
Yeah.
So,
there you go.
One of those things.
It happens.
Caught it live. What can you say?
Well, that's what happens when you shoot a prime. You got to go to different targets.
Yeah, I should have learned my lesson. I did that already once, but
happens.
It happens.
It gets hungry.
Yeah.
Take a bite.
All right, Amy. So you've been pretty busy lately. I see a lot of things coming up on your Facebook page. Some beautiful mounts there. You just did a full-size black bear as well. That was pretty awesome. The story behind it was even better. You want to talk a little bit about that? How was that experience? That had to be pretty emotional.
Yeah, that was a really great story. A couple years ago, I actually met this lady at the tax office while I was waiting on my taxes to be done. And I introduced myself, and she said, I have a bear in the freezer. I've been looking for the right person to do the job. So she brought it over to me, and it had actually been in her freezer a couple years because she didn't know what to do with it. It was a little freezer burned, but I brought it back to life. And her partner had wanted to get the bear mounted, but they just waited on that. And then he had passed away, and she had me do this as a tribute to him. And it was very emotional as I was working on it. I just knew how much that was going to mean to her. And she was speechless when she came and picked it up. And it's those types of things that really make it all worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
Just like, a kid's first year, all those special things, that's going to really touch their lives.
Yeah. So now you said it came out a little freezer burnt. Was it like hair starting to slip, or?
No, I think that's a common misconception. People think if you leave something in the freezer too long that the hair will fall out, but that's not what happens. In this case, a freezer burn, it starts to mummify. and dry out. So you won't be able to have the flexibility of the hide. You know, kind of like if you leave meat in your freezer too long, it starts to get kind of white and not good anymore. That's what freezer is. And you can avoid that by always wrapping your hides in multiple trash bags, 2 or 3 really thick mill trash bags. The more the better, especially if you're planning on keeping it in the freezer for longer than a year or so.
Okay.
Wow.
Good to know.
That's good advice. That's great advice right there. Because there are times where, we'll skin it, we'll get it ready to go, and then we put it in the freezer right away, just to, so especially early season when it's so hot, and sometimes taxidermists are far away, or you can't get to them right away, or they have limited hours early season. That's the only thing to do. So that's great advice right
There's
there.
absolutely nothing wrong with freezing your hide and freezing it for extended time periods, as long as you just have it wrapped really well.
Okay.
Not all bags are created equal. You can't just throw it in a Walmart bag. It'll be freezer burned for a week.
Yeah. And non-scented too, right? I heard something once that like the scent does something.
I've not had any problems with that. Actually, you could put a stinky coyote in one of those bags and do me a favor.
I think that's the meat you're thinking of, Paul. When you debone it, you want to make sure whatever you put it in, like we debone them and put it in black trash bags, but we make sure it's all non-scented too.
Yeah. But I've done things that have been in a freezer for 15 years. So
oh wow.
That's
there's not exactly a time limit for it if you have it well bagged.
Yeah. Well, I think you made a great point there. Is it Amy? Amy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you made a great point a little bit ago when you talked about that black bear story, because I wish more people would understand. I've had people, and I want you to kind of respond to this in a minute too. I've had people see my mounts, mostly whitetail. Pretty soon, a lot of African mounts are coming in, but they'll often say to me, like, why would you pay for that? And why would you do that to an animal? So like for me, the memory of that hunt will be in existence in my mind the rest of my life. Until the end of my life, I'm going to get to look at that deer. And I'm looking at the deer on the wall right now. That was on my grandfather's farm. That was on our property. One was my first big buck ever with a bow. And I can look at those deer and replay that hunt like a reel, like a Facebook reel in my mind, the weather, the day, what it meant to me. And for my personal story, I'd like to hear from you, Amy, about what people say. What do you tell people out there in the world when maybe they don't understand why hunters mount their trophies or mount a special animal to themselves?
I think if you are not a hunter and you just don't get it, then it's harder to understand, but it's no different than any tangible memory you would save from something that you enjoyed. Rather than a photograph, now we have this actual item we can have to remember our hunt. And I think people need to kind of put themselves in our shoes. They may not be into hunting, but maybe they're into something else. And it's a memory we can take and hang on the wall for decades to come, to pass down to the generations. It's just like a photograph, but in 3D.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
For sure.
So what are you working on currently? Obviously we saw the bear, we saw a couple of the African stuff that you're doing. So do you do things in segments? Like it's like, okay, it's getting ready for deer season. We have to, like, how do you plan out your year when it comes to your taxidermy schedule?
So at this point, I've gotten pretty good at knowing how much I can do in a certain time frame. So I try not to take on more animals than I can do in a 12-month period. I'll take in obviously all the deer during deer season, then I'll tan the hides, and then throughout the year, I'll mount those deer up while working in other items like bears and bobcats. I kind of jump around. 1 week I'll mount deer heads, but then I'll get kind of bored with that after a week. So I'll go on and do a bobcats for a week. So I work in like a rotation.
Okay. Keeps you fresh.
Yeah. If I could do 100 deer heads in a row, I think that would get real dull. There's only so much you can do with deer heads, but with the rotation, I'm always fresh for the next thing.
And Amy, this is your full-time gig, right? Like you don't have anything else that you do like on the side. This is your full-time job.
Yeah, this is full-time, more than full-time. Some months it's 50 to 60 hours a week.
How do you deal with, so my dad does taxidermy. How do you deal with like with your clientele? Is it like a half down deposit first and then the like rest after? Because I know he would have issues with people would actually pay like deposits and then would never come pick up their animals because they didn't want to, pay the remainder or whatever.
Yeah, so this year, I apologize for my dogs barking. They hear motorcycle bikes.
You're good.
This year, I have gone to a 50% deposit. You've got to take a deposit because that buys your tanning supplies and your forms and your glue and all that. It also locks people in to coming back and getting their animal. I feel like if you didn't take a deposit, a lot of things would possibly get left behind. Maybe someone shoots a bigger deer and regrets bringing you the smaller one. And there's not a very good resale market for certain animals, especially smaller deer head mounts.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So have you had a scenario where people have not shown back up?
Very, very rarely. I've had one bobcat not picked up and in a couple skull mounts, but generally everyone comes back around. It just might not be as quick as I'd like it to be. When my showroom is piled with 30 deer heads, I need the space, but sometimes people will like to wait 4 to 6 weeks to come get it. So try not to do that to your taxidermist.
Yeah. Well, Paul, before the show, Paul actually told me that if you ever have a 190 no one took, to call him right away.
Yeah, I think they're coming back.
Look at this.
Little spike bucks.
I'm totally kidding. He didn't say that.
It still hurts, Josh. Thanks.
Paul.
So
Yeah.
Amy, I was looking at your Facebook before we got on here, and you had a lot, like you said, bobcats, cougars, mountain lions, and then obviously all the different animals. Do you have a favorite, like a specific favorite animal that you do enjoy doing before others, or do you just kind of like them all as they rotate?
I like them all as they rotate, but I guess I would have to say bobcat mounts are my favorite to do. I get more of those than anything aside from deer heads, and you can put a lot of expression into them, and seems like it's a favorite on Facebook. So I enjoy doing those and posting them up.
Nice.
Well, a healthy herd then. You guys are getting a lot. Is it local, a lot of it, or?
No, I don't think I would be able to get that many bobcats in locally. Also, our southern cats are typically kind of scrawny and small. So I would say about 60% of these cats are coming from other areas outside my local area. People box them up and just ship the whole frozen animal to me.
Yeah, I've got 2 that are getting done. My dad's doing them, and one I shot during bow season, and then one my wife killed. So yeah, so hopefully here before too long. We're trying to figure out what we're gonna do. If we're gonna do like a fighting deal, that's what we thought. We kind of thought maybe doing like a fighting thing. I don't know. We have like a balcony, so we thought about putting one like hanging on a limb on a over our balcony or something. Be kind of cool.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's the thing with the full body mounts. There's so many different things you can do.
Yeah,
whereas I struggle to come up with new ideas for deer heads.
It's kind of like it's kind of like a stabilizer. Like if you're trying to get like a picture of the stabilizer, there's only so many things you can do. You know what I mean?
I guess I think of the deer head like that's kind of your bread and butter. Like you're gonna get 100 or something deer. Like that's your status quo, and then everything else that comes above that is cake. I mean, I don't know, but I would assume that would be kind of like your, like everyone, like a auto body shop. Everyone does oil changes and brake jobs,
That's how it was for me in the past. I think that's definitely the case for a lot of taxidermists, but I'm getting so popular with these bobcats and small game mounts. I'm actually thinking I'm eventually going to transition to specializing more in just that. And then the deer heads are going to be a side item.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, I was out in Utah last year and I shot an elk and I got it mounted out there. And the guy specialized in cats. So people would ship in cats from lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, no, like bobcats,
getting ready to do it if you
jaguars,
didn't.
and everything.
I like it.
And then elk was like his bread and butter because he's in Utah, So, but it's the cat work is just so interesting to me. It's just so lifelike.
I want to do more mountain lions in the future. Just being here in North Carolina, obviously we don't have lions anywhere near here, so I don't get those in as often. I do 2 or 3 a year, but I'd like to focus on doing more lions.
I'm going mountain lion hunting this year, so I'll keep you in mind.
Heck yeah.
Well, we're setting up a hunt next year for mountain lions, so at least I am. So if anyone who wants to join in, we'll be bringing you some game. But before we start getting a little into your story here and your history, I have a personal question. Do you do moose?
Yes, I have done several moose, the big Alaskan type moose, and they are a big job. One of the heaviest things I work with, even more so than a big bear mount. A moose is even heavier to me.
In 10 days here to go to Newfoundland in Canada on an archery moose hunt. So if we get one, at least I know where to bring it. So we'll be keeping you in mind, and I don't think I'll be able to ship it. I might have to drive it to you, but
Yeah, they're not too bad to ship if you cut the skull plate in half. That's not a problem to put the two pieces back together.
I might cry though.
Do you do your own pedestals and stuff for whitetails?
As in like the woodwork for the pedestals.
Yeah.
I have somebody else do those. I'm not a woodworker, but there's a lot of people out there that'll make you a really nice custom pedestal.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I know like a lot of, like you were saying about how you can only do so many things with a whitetail. And I know like a lot of people, that's how they kind of, you know, make it their own, is make a really nice
Definitely opens
pedestal.
up the possibility. Then you can have, deer reaching for branches or all kinds.
Yeah.
And you'll see that really artistic stuff at these taxidermy shows I attend. A lot of people don't even realize there's, shows for taxidermy, but you'll see all kind of outside the box things there. And I like those shows because, nobody wants to copy anyone, but it gives you ideas to kind of expand on.
Right.
It's like going into Hobby Lobby with your camera, and then that way you can go pick out your own stuff and then go home and do it.
I told yourself.
That's my wife, not me.
I got you.
You go on Pinterest first.
Yeah.
You snapshot it, and then you go to Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
Fall steps it up.
Yeah.
I'm a trained professional.
Yeah. How many mounts do you take in a year, do you think?
I would say last year was about 200 mounts. It was 120 deer, about 40 bobcats, and then some other miscellaneous things, bears and everything else.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Okay. I have a question for you. Do you, when you do taxidermy to South or African animals in general compared to the North American animals, is there anything different you do, or is it all the same?
It's all pretty much the same. It can be a little more challenging because, out in the African bush, they're skinning these animals out, not necessarily with the best tools. So they tend to have a lot more holes and cuts and issues with the hide versus, a deer that someone's taken very good care of. So there's more repair work to be done. But other than that, it's very similar to an elk or a deer.
Okay.
Got it. So growing up and currently we shot a ton of bear in our life, and an old timer told us once how to skin a bear for taxidermy, and I just kind of want to run it by you and see if that still holds true for today. So obviously we would gut it and we would lay it on its back, and then we would go from bottom of sternum up the inside of the paws to the paw, then cut the paw off, same thing on the other side, cut the paw off, and then same thing in the back, and then skin it all the way up to the neck, and then just cut the head off there and then bring it that way. Is that kind of still hold true? So it's like a V shape under.
Right. Yes, you want to avoid cutting up into this chest and neck area.
Yeah.
Just as you wouldn't do that on a deer, you don't want to do that with the bear. So you want to remain below the brisket, down in the armpit area, and then go straight down, take care of the back legs. I always tell people, if you're not entirely sure what you want done, skin it like that, like you would for a rug. Picture laying it out flat for a rug, because from there you can do a rug, a full body mount, a half body, or cut it for a shoulder.
Makes sense.
So now if someone happens to cut short or something like that, do you use, like, if they bring you the whole thing or there's like holes, would you cut and then move up some of that fur, or would you try to patch as much as you can?
I'll try to patch. On a bear, it's easy since their hair is long and thick. It becomes a lot more challenging on something like a deer head. A lot of taxidermists are not as adventurous as me, and they'll just turn down a deer cape and say, we need a new one if you've butchered it up. Meanwhile, I've done things like stitch briskets from other capes onto capes so that I can, salvage that person's deer. But the best option is to just do it right the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can fully admit I made a mistake this past African trip I got back from 2 weeks ago. I shot a nice Impala, and I said right away, let's get him shoulder mounted. And I didn't realize how big the sable was I shot, and it ended up being quite large. And I made a mistake and told them not to, because I was going to just do a European skull. And then I called back later and said, hey, by the way, I'd like to have that shoulder mount if possible. So they're going to probably try to source another cape that I didn't get, just to make sure I can get that done. It was my mistake on that one.
Yeah, it's important with your taxidermist to let them know when you drop it off what you want done. I mean, I've even had people say they just want a standard shoulder mount, and then they call me back an hour later and they say they want like a half body or even just a wall pedestal, which takes more hide. I say it's too late. I've already cut the excess off.
Yeah.
Just down to what I needed.
Got it.
Understand
Another personal question. So back a couple years ago, shot a buck, had it mounted, go to pick it up. They mounted it the wrong way. Okay. So I've known the taxidermist for a long time, not a big deal. I want it the other way because it's going in a specific spot.
Yeah.
Like I have a theme
that.
going.
Put it upside
So,
down so it's looking the right way.
yeah. So he, and I guess I'm asking you from your professional expertise. So he tried to get it, it was recently mounted. He tried to get it off. So I guess I don't know if he soaked it or whatever he did, but it ended, he just said it didn't work. So what is that didn't work? Because then he had a source, and it was early season, Pennsylvania, first week of September, like really short hair. It took him a year to find another deer that looked kind of like it, so it's kind of disheartening, but and it was his fault, but like what didn't work in that scenario? Was it just too late or?
So I have to wonder if the hide was tanned or not. That's a big factor. I recently remounted an entire Bobcat mount. It was tanned and I soaked the whole thing in the sink and it just came right off like it was fresh. The hide was very fresh. It had only been a couple weeks, but I feel like I would be able to confidently re-soak a hide that had been tanned by me. But if they were using a dry preservative, which is where they flesh it but apply this powder and then dry it, that will never come off again.
Okay, so that might be the case.
Some taxidermists also use like a 2-part epoxy glue to hold the hide down versus a water-based glue. And the epoxy glue is not going to detach from the skin. It pretty much locks it into place. I like a water-based glue so that if anything does need adjusting, sometimes when the animal's drying, I don't check it, as soon as I should, and a lip is, dried a little incorrectly or something. No problem. I'm able to take a wet rag, re-soak it, and just fix everything right back into place.
So a couple different ways that could have possibly went wrong there. All right. Well, that makes me, I guess, feel a little bit better. I don't know.
Knock on wood, that's one thing I have never done, which is mount somebody's animal facing the wrong way. I keep my records really good and I make the customer sign for what they want. If we have run into anything, it's clients not understanding what is left and what is right. I always say, picture you're the deer on the wall. Are you looking left or right? Because if you're standing in front of it, you can get confused and then that's just a big miscommunication.
Yeah, and that's how you order the mounts too. The foam is the way that the animal's actually looking, his left or his right.
Yes, not as you look at it standing in front of it, because that would be the opposite.
Now, does that work the same, or is the same true for full body on it? Everything is the animal's perspective.
It's always going to be the animal's left or right.
Got it.
Right. I got a question for you. So I have a couple mounts here on the wall, and I see advertisements for different products all the time, but what would you recommend to maintain and keep these mounts looking good for years to come? Like I mean, do you need to get some of these special chemicals and things you see, or is there something simple that you can use to keep them looking good?
Really, I do very little to my own mounts. I just every now and then will take a damp wet rag and just very gently dust all the dust off the hair and fluff them back up and polish the eyes with Windex since they're glass. But I have not actually sprayed anything on my mounts. They claim that there's these sprays that are like sunscreen for your mounts and UV resistant. And I'd like to give that a try because that's the #1 thing that can destroy mounts. You see this stuff in old bow shops and stuff, and it's like it's faded out, and that's what the sun is going to do to it. But I keep my showroom completely sun free, and I've got mounts in there that are 20 years old now, and they have very little fading.
Okay. And there was, I wish I could think of it right now. It's slipping my mind, but have you ever heard of issues of like, I mean, it sounds silly, but it was a commercial. There was like bugs and stuff getting in the whitetail, like along there, their racks are mounted into the hide and everything else. Is that an issue that you've seen or ran into?
That is not an issue I've ran into in my shop, but things can happen. And there's this stuff called mount medics. And it's a line of products that you spray on your mount. And apparently it's a mix of chemicals that repel bugs. I say that's some pretty cheap insurance. That wouldn't hurt at all to do. Typically, you're not going to see bug issues with a really well tanned hide. Dermestids like to get in there and eat meat. So that said, I did have an issue with a fella. I shipped him a Bobcat mount. He was in Texas, and turns out he's got some type of moth infestation in his house. Not only had the moths gone after the Bobcat mount that I did, because he thought it was something that, you know, something wrong with the mount, but the moths were in some of his other stuff too. And, you know, moths will eat clothing. They don't discriminate really against a tanned hide versus dry preserve. So I think some of that spray would have worked well in that situation.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's
I also
interesting you
think
brought that up.
isn't some of it like improper tanning that'll cause that? Because isn't it also like some of the older mounts, some people didn't even really tan them. They just kind of put something on them and mounted them.
Yeah, there's a method called dry preserve, and every time I talk about dry preserve versus tan on my page, I get a lot of hate and excitement from the taxidermists who dry preserve that say this is a perfectly good method. Stop talking, you know, badly about methods that are different than your own. And my opinion on dry preserve is that if the hide is really well fleshed, if everything is prepared correctly, then it can make a quality mount. There's mounts with dry preserve that have been, you know, lasting for decades, but oftentimes if you don't get every bit of meat off, then you're just throwing some powder on top of the meat and it's going to be a problem. So preparation is key. With the tanning, you have a little bit more leeway in that, you know, throughout your tanning process, you can shave it down over time and eliminate that meat and tissue.
Got it.
What's your turnaround? What's your turnaround like on your mounts that you're doing? Like mostly your whitetail, since that's your bread and butter kind of.
The whitetails are the fastest thing I turn out. The first ones that came in line in the season will come back in about 5 months. The latest ones might take up to a year to get back. The whitetails are always back before the next season rolls around. The full body stuff is what runs a little longer than a year most times.
Yeah, makes sense. Intricacies, I should say, of that.
Yeah, and there's reasons for that. You know, I do mostly try to go in order so as to be fair, but at the same time, you know, I have a rack that holds my deer antlers. You can actually see it in the back. There's still some antlers up there. Yeah. If that's not empty by the next deer season, we've got a storage issue. So I have to get the antlers off the rack.
It sounds similar to, I know the taxidermist I've used here in Ohio. He knows about how long it takes him to do each hide, you know, on average. And he only takes enough to make it to where he finishes before the next season starts. So it's kind of like get in there quick.
Just a little over what I was comfortable with finishing this year. So that means next year I know to go a little bit lower. You know, it's a learning process.
Yeah, makes sense.
So how did you get into this? I'm curious.
A lot of people are surprised that I have as many years under my belt as I do at this point. And that's because I got started in it at 13. Very randomly, I lived in the country. I would ride around on this golf cart with my little baby brother and sister. And I happened across a snake that had been run over. It was a king snake. And, you know, they have that real pretty black and white chain pattern on their back. And me being the kind of weird little kid that I was, I said, I want to turn that into a belt. And I got on the internet and I, you know, read how to mix glycerin and different tanning products to tan this snake. And I skinned it and made the belt. And, you know, my Google searches on that led me to taxidermy and I started thinking about doing other things. So that's really how it all started. Just if that snake hadn't been run over that day, I don't know if I'd have really got into it, but
that's crazy.
Yeah, and then I met some taxidermists online. This was, you know, back when message boards were real big, and met some local taxidermists who gave me a raccoon and a deer cape. You know, I didn't have any money or supplies at that time, and they gave me a bunch of stuff to get started. So I really appreciate those very first individuals that helped me get going.
What an interesting story. So you just basically like got online and said, hey, give me your dead stuff and I'll do stuff with it.
Yeah, it wasn't like something I always thought was cool. Like I knew what taxidermy was, but never had given it actually any thought till And then, of course, when I do get interested in something, I get very passionate and obsessive about it. So it was all over at that point. I was going to be a taxidermist.
I think all of us here in the Bowman can understand your passion because all of us have our own little niche that we just absolutely love. And for Paul, I know it's working and tuning in bows. I know you're big into the whisker biscuits and rests and such like that. But I got to mess with him a little bit. I'm just messing with him. But I think all of us, I was like with broadheads or Cedric are passionate with photography. Troy
Knitting.
and knitting. Yeah, arm knitting. Are you into arm knitting like my wife?
Yeah,
is?
jack of all trades,
Yeah.
master of none.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I think I just respect everything you do because I think when a person puts their passion and their God-given purpose on this planet to work, you can see behind you what that turns into, and that's pretty awesome stuff.
Yeah.
To love what you do every day, when I go out to work, I generally really enjoy what I'm doing, and you can't really ask for much more.
Oh no, everyone should be like that. Trust me. So do you still have the belt?
Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Do you still have your snake belt?
That's a good question. No, the belt has been gone for a very long time. I wish I did. I actually threw away a couple of my first mounts. My very first deer I ever mounted, I remember throwing that away. I guess I didn't realize that was going to be such a little piece of history.
Yeah. I think we've all thrown out things we shouldn't have.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I definitely do have some of my older mounts. I did a little baby tiger that was donated to me. I was 16 years old, one of my first competition mounts. So that's 20 years old now, and it's right here in the shop.
That's
nice.
Awesome.
I was just going to ask, what's the most, is there one animal that you mounted that was just so unique or the craziest mount? Like what's the one thing that stands out in your mind?
Well, my baby giraffe was definitely the most kind of special and cool to me. But I've also done like an armadillo. I've got 3 different types of porcupines here in the shop. So I deal in a lot of unique stuff.
Okay,
Have you ever had somebody ask you to do a mount and you're like, I can't do that?
Or a pet? How about a pet?
For example, my dad had somebody ask them to mount their dog.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't do that.
I was thinking it. I was wondering.
A lot of people want their pets. It's
yeah.
not that unheard of, and I have done several dogs and cats.
Yeah.
But that was about 5 years ago when I
There you go, Paul.
Now these days,
jeez.
Wow.
why do I can do bobcats, and you can order forms for those.
I hear a dog
crazy.
growling right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna step out and grab it.
Heard something growling, I thought, in the background.
I'm glad you asked it, Cedric, because I was thinking it.
Dude, listen,
Yeah.
he's like he mounted a long. So do you guys have a Longhorn Steakhouse? Like any of you guys have like a Longhorn Steakhouse?
Yeah.
So he actually did a Longhorn that ended up in like one of our local Longhorn Steakhouses, which was kind of cool.
That's cool.
And it was insane because like he's a small, he doesn't, he's more like a part-time thing. It was a full-time, but then it became a part-time thing. And so all the equipment that he had to do, like it took a lot just to be able to hold that Longhorn because he was so heavy, so top heavy, like whenever he was working on it. It was crazy.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So right now, what's the size of your shop? Is it like outside your house? Do you have a garage space? Like, what does your shop look like? Is it like storefront or?
It's basically a 4-bay garage off of my house. It's 40 by 22.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had this house built a couple years ago, so it was nice. I was able to, kind of pick where I wanted everything, kind of planned to have this area be my shop.
It looks great in the background there. It looks really nice.
So what are your like, I guess, goals for your business just going forward? I mean, do you have like any, I guess, big aspirations, or do you just like the way things are going now, or,
I like the way things are going now. 5 to 10 years ago, I had a whole bunch of aspirations and I've hit a lot of those goals. I'm proud of myself for that. And honestly, I can't take on much more work than I did last season. So at this point, we either just stay the same or kind of decrease the work a little bit. I've got 2 school-age kids, and you still want to spend some time with them before they move out. So, family is the most important thing. Work is not everything, but I am a workaholic at times.
Yeah, for sure. Totally understand that and respect it. I'm sure all of us do.
I know all of us, when you said kids, I know Cedric doesn't have any yet, but maybe some coming,
I have
soon.
dogs.
But anyways, has your passion for taxidermy passed on to any of your kids yet? I know all of us, we want to share our passions for the outdoors and hunting and everything else with our kids. Is that translated onto yours, or they just kind of enjoy what you do and like seeing the animals?
Yeah, I wish they showed more interest in it, but they're their own separate person, and I don't think they want to do the taxidermy. But they come out here and they spend time with me, and they'll do little jobs for a couple bucks, around the shop. But,
Nice.
Understand that. It's awesome.
Do you hunt at all, or have you hunted in the past, or is it just something you weren't brought up around, or what's your stance on that?
I wasn't really brought up around hunting. Of course, I wasn't brought up around taxidermy either, but
Yeah.
I've definitely done some hunting. I've harvested 3 or 4 deer. I got my biggest giraffe in Africa in 2019, along with some other small game. So I've dabbled in it here and there, but I would say it's not my passion as much.
Dabbles.
Yeah.
Dabbled.
When we get into the thick of deer season and I'm, skinning like 2 dozen deer a day, I don't want to add another deer to that list.
Yeah.
She's like, I've shot
Yeah.
3 200 inches.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Yeah.
And a giraffe.
Venison, but my clients bring me extra venison, so I'm always stocked on meat.
You can't
I
beat
can say
that.
it's probably like the guy that works at the pizza shop that hates eating pizza or whatever. You deal with animals
Yeah.
every day, so
is
it probably
like
kind of turns you
Why-
off on that side.
Why does everyone always got to talk about me? It
Well,
always
you still-
circles back.
You
to
still
the bust
enjoy
on me.
pizza, don't you, Paul?
It looked good today. You sent that picture. It looked tasty.
Yeah, we're on Channel 7 today.
It's funny
Some
because I was just about to ask Amy if she was a fixed or mechanical type person, but I don't I don't want to go in that debate. So you fixed or mechanical? Oh,
Fixed, yeah.
Ooh.
oh, you haven't tried a Clovis yet.
Yeah, that's
We'll get
so.
there.
buy
Amy, I
it.
have a
I'm
I got a
listening.
good one for you. Have you had like have your prices had to change with just kind of the way things are? Because I know like McKinsey's kind of raised their prices, haven't they? Just like as everything's gone on, and like have your clients been receptive of that in a good light or no?
Most are understanding of it. I mean, what hasn't gone up?
Yeah.
But McKinsey goes up 5 to 10% every year. Every fall, a new catalog comes out and everything's higher. And there definitely are some people out there that still expect prices from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't know. The days of a $300 deer head are over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And,
spoke about that on one of our other podcasts with the average price of taxidermy for a regular shoulder mount was anywhere from about the whole US was anywhere from $600 to $1,200 based on where you were.
That's right.
So the
I'm
days of
I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed to be in the lower end of that bracket. I was 650 last year. That's probably why I got more deer heads than I wanted. So I'm going up this year, but I do think people are going to complain. They think everything else can go up, but the taxidermist should just continue to lower their hourly wage.
Yeah, I
Make things
understand that.
affordable.
Yeah.
Somebody
And
on
it's
my,
not like
on my page yesterday said, you keep going up in price. Now nobody's going to be able to afford you. I hope you price yourself right out of business.
Mm.
I mean, do people say that to the grocery store?
Yeah,
Or
yes.
somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
That
think-
frustrates me. That frustrates me. Online trolls. I could go on for days about this one, everybody. It's just unbelievable.
I,
So,
I
Speaking
met
of, yeah.
another
Don't worry.
taxidermist who can't get the prices that he needs to survive.
Yeah.
Well, you know your worth. If you, like you said, you took in so much work last year, so you know what you can charge and what it's valued as. So that's
There's
awesome.
a great market for good quality taxidermy work, but there's a lot of bad taxidermy out there, and you're not going to be able to charge much for it.
Well, I'll tell you, it's
Right.
just like anything. Paul's mentioned it before. It's like anything we buy. You're gonna, I'm not gonna walk into. I love my Ford F-150, but I'm not gonna walk into a Ford dealer locally and say, "Hey, could you like give me 40% off on that today?" Just because I'm.
Yeah.
They'd laugh me out the door, And so I think when people
Mhm.
do that, you pay for what you get in this country, and for quality taxidermy like yourself by an American worker, I'll pay for it. For a quality broadhead, if you want it and you want it 100% American made, you're gonna have to think about what you want to spend your money on.
But
Yeah.
I also
mean,
think that the taxidermy piece, they don't realize the art that goes into it.
Mhm.
Like it's a skill,
Yeah.
it's painting, it's working with forms, it's, between the talents of knowing
Sewing.
how to tan and sewing. And like, there's so much art that goes into it. They just think, okay, well, I'm just going to soak it and put it on the deer and boom, it's
Right.
done. And it's not the case. It's not a factory. And trust me, when you see a good piece of art next to a not so good piece of art, you're gonna you're gonna want to
Well,
know who did that.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's like those. I mean, how many times? And Amy, maybe you can kind of hit on this, but I know my dad's had people bring in deer that have like fallen off the wall and broken a piece of their rack. So now you got to mold their rack, and you've got to, manipulate that to where you don't see any blemishes or, whatever. And so, I mean, it's so much. Yeah, it's 100% art.
Sure.
Yeah, and every taxidermist does a little bit different style. That's what I love about it. Just like
Mhm.
paintings, they're not all in the same style. So even among the really high-end taxidermy, you'll be able to see differences, and that's just the different artistic styles. So,
Yeah.
sometimes people like to get into debates. Who is truly the best taxidermist? I say there's not a best. Which one do you like the style of? Pick that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's me, maybe it's not.
Speaking
That's
of
awesome.
that, do you have any like little signature like quirks that you like to do, like with your taxidermy that you could look at a mount, say years from now, and say like, okay, I know I did that because I specifically always do this one thing a certain way, or do you have anything like that, or do you know of any that do that?
It's what's the funny thing is I think it's the kind of thing you can't see yourself as the artist, because when I look at other people's art, I know when I see it which person
Okay.
has done that mount. I can't see that in mine, but other taxidermists tell me they know which mounts are mine when they see it. So I don't exactly know what my defining feature is, but it's probably
Okay.
there.
Makes
I
sense.
do like to fluff my mounts out really good, bring the cheeks forward on the bobcat, so you have that mane. I'm all about really good grooming on the cats.
Yeah,
That's
all the
awesome.
pictures of the cats on your on Facebook and everything were awesome. Like super realistic, super lifelike. They're awesome.
Thank you.
Now, Amy, when you work on a deer, let's say that you have someone that comes in and says, "I would like a euro or a skull mount," or do you offer an array of things with whitetail, or what do you offer with that?
I try to offer everything just so I don't have to turn the client away and send them to someone else. But depending on what it is, I might sub some smaller items out. Like I have a guy that does skulls. He does a better job than I am able to do on a skull. So he does
Gotcha.
my skulls for me.
Okay, makes sense.
The only
You
time
guys-
I'll sub something is if that person can do even better job than me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I like to keep it
Yeah.
all in the shop so that I can control the quality.
I know some
You-
people like the new hydro dipping thing on the skulls. I didn't know. I was kind
I
of
was gonna
thinking
ask.
like, oh, sorry, Cedric, go ahead.
No, that you're
Same
hitting
thing.
exactly what. Yeah,
Yeah,
hitting
I didn't
exactly
like.
what I was gonna ask.
I didn't know. Do you do like hydro dipping with skulls? A lot of guys kind of like that, to some degree.
I don't do a lot of that. I definitely wouldn't do it myself. And honestly, if somebody wanted a hydro dip skull, I'd probably just point them in the direction of buying a pre-dipped artificial skull. They look very convincing, and that way you're not paying double to first get your skull cleaned and then get it dipped.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I didn't
That
know
makes
how you
sense.
really.
Got it. What's the animal
Is
over your
there?
shoulder when it's back to us? Your other shoulder.
Is that a
The
water
full
buck? The water
I've
buck.
I've got a couple water bucks, Tessabe in the background.
and the
Um,
full one. What's that one?
The butt of a clip springer right here.
Awesome.
Oh, what?
Springer. Like it's
Oh.
kind of like a diker, but
Is that one of the? Is that like the 10 tiny 10 type thing? Okay.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Have
Is
you ever
there-
had?
is-
Go ahead, Cedric.
Oh, is there one animal that you just hate doing?
Yes, wild boar. They are very greasy. They have a big, thick cartilage shield. Most of them do. They are more trouble than they're worth for the pay. So they're cool in the end, but I don't like fleshing those guys. And a big bear is right up with that as well. Just as far as the mess and I see that bear you have. That looks like a pretty big one.
Yeah, that was my dad shot that in 1994. It was 410 pounds dressed out.
Wow.
So probably 450, 455 alive. It was the
Oh.
state record that year. So
Wow.
They
Big
get their
old boy.
big shoulders when they're that size.
oh yeah. And we have on camera, because we used to video back then, he was chased away by one that was double his size.
Wow.
And then my dad shot him the next night. So it's
Wow.
crazy.
Bears are one of the most commonly misjudged animals on
yeah.
size. So many people will tell me they're bringing me a 400-pound bear, and it's not 200 laying on the floor.
Yeah.
Part of me says let them have their fun, just let them think what they'll think. But I usually try to correct them, because then I'm going to mount it. It's going to look like a 200-pound bear, and their friends are going to say I made it smaller.
But
Oh,
Paul, I thought you told me I shot a 200-inch deer last year, man. You told me it was.
I didn't.
That's
I
what
am
you
the
said.
most honest I grew up around bears. We had property in New York State that was one of the main thoroughfare and breeding grounds for the Northeast bear. And I mean, I've shot four myself. My dad's shot one. Our whole family has shot a ton of them, and I've probably seen thousands of them. And it takes the misconception is that 200 to 300 pound range because they all kind of look the same.
Yeah.
But when a big bear comes in, you know it. Like they get I've seen some 800 pound bears I have pictures of. They're just the size of Volkswagen Beetles.
Wow.
Like it's their backs are over those big garbage cans, their bellies are rubbing on the ground. Like you just know when they
Wow.
come in.
I guess weight is a hard thing to judge because I can't believe how many people say they've got a 40 or 50 pound bobcat. And as soon as they bring it in, I'll put it on the scales. It might be 21 pounds. I've done a few true 40 pound cats, and I may not be all that tall, but still, I hold it up here and it goes all the way to the ground. It takes a lot of cat to reach 40 pounds. And I don't think I've had one here in North Carolina brought to me that was really much above 30. So
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
something.
mine was 21 is what mine was.
yeah,
Yeah.
21 is a good average size cat. The really big toms I just posted one the other day. It looks big and thick in the shoulders. That's about a 30 pound cat. So a
Yeah.
40 pounder is a true monster, and they don't even make many forms for them in that size. So it can get challenging.
Yeah. I
Dang.
think it's something we've talked about before in the podcast together as Bowman is, judging an animal when you're out hunting. And for all of us whitetail guys, you spend 20, 25 years of your life hunting whitetail here and you're used to it. But like if a Southern guy comes up, which will happen this fall to Ohio, they're going to go, hey, I'm going to shoot every buck you have here. And I'm like, hold off. There are bigger deer here because you're not used to seeing that, where you live. But I can tell you 100% with going to, hunting on these trips in Africa, every time I see an animal like a kudu, I can't judge kudu because, I'm not used to seeing a 40-inch versus a 48-inch or 50-inch kudu. So every kudu I see that's a decent sized kudu, I'm like, oh, I want to shoot that. And they're like, no, hold off. It's not that big. No, that looks big to me. To me, I'm not used to judging those animals in the hoof. So I think it's like bobcat. I'd have a hard time judging. I don't see that many.
Well, you see all these trail cam pictures, and people say, is this a bobcat or a mountain lion? From the perspective, it's hard to tell. It looks almost like it's a mountain lion, but then if you pay attention to some key items in the
Like
photo, you realize
scaling.
it's a bobcat, but it's very hard to tell scale.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we've talked about all the different animals that you do. Do you do any fish or anything like that? Do you mount any of those?
No, I don't do any fish. I also don't do birds. So
Okay,
I specialize in just animals with fur.
nice.
Heck yeah.
So I got to ask, you're from my research and what I've done in obviously trying to get you on the podcast and doing research out there about you is you're probably one of the few female taxidermists out there right now and doing the scale and the quality that you're doing. I mean, when you look at the names of some of them, you're up there at the top of the list. That's got to be pretty good, right? It feels like
Yeah.
a huge accomplishment coming from something you wanted to do. And, just looking back in the generations growing up, like I can never say I've ever seen a female taxidermist. More recently, yes, but growing up, never. So it's pretty awesome, and we're honored to have you here.
More recently, it's definitely become more popular with the ladies. I know this as far as going to taxidermy shows. 20 years ago, I was, a real novelty at these shows. There were definitely some women involved in it, but it was rare. But now these days, I have lots of friends who are female taxidermists. So I feel like it's tripled, if not more than that. I've trained a lot of women in my shop. I used to give taxidermy classes. Right now, I'm too busy to do that at the moment, but the amount of women that have come to me for training, because I guess they feel more comfortable, working with a woman. But yeah, I think it'll always be a male dominated field, but it's definitely not as unusual to see a female taxidermist.
I think it's
And for
incredible.
me, I see that natural segue because of the artistry that's involved in it, and the nuance. Like I work in the restaurant industry my whole life and run a restaurant group here in DC. And it's coming more prevalent, especially in the culinary fields, to have from a male dominated society and culinary to female dominated now because of the little nuances, the technique, the visionary that honestly, like us as men, we just don't have. Like there's probably 1 in 10, where on the female side of it, there's 1 in 3 that have that. So I can see that natural progression, and it's just pretty awesome.
Females are good at, blending makeup, and we're used to doing things like that. So I feel like we have kind of an artistic edge, especially when
So
it
is
comes to
Cedric.
finishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, you're exactly right.
But I know some very, very good male taxidermists too. So I say you just have to have that natural artistic talent.
Yeah.
You either have it or you
Was
don't. Seen that from those classes that I gave.
is there one thing, or was there like one thing that was like difficult to learn to like kind of get over that hump to kind of take you to the next level? Like whether it be fleshing or stitching or sewing or painting or pedicles or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the fleshing and shaving process of the hides. You
Yeah.
can give a lot of people a perfectly tanned, stretchy, soft hide and say mount it, and they might do a pretty good job with that. But actually taking the hide off the animal and getting it to that point where you're ready to mount the animal, it took me years to really get speedy and efficient and, stop cutting holes.
Do you do your own tanning, or do you contract that out or sub it out?
I do most of my own tanning, which is a big
impressive.
burden for me.
Yeah, 100%.
But it also allows me to keep it all right here in the shop.
Yeah.
No worried about hides, getting lost or cut up. It's all in my control. So about the only thing that doesn't get tanned here is the African stuff, because we often have those crates shipped straight to the wildlife gallery, which is a tannery in Michigan, and they do a really good job on that African stuff.
Cool.
Okay.
Now, would there be a difference in that because of the way, if they're not, I guess they're really not furry, right? They're more of that sleek, like kind of smooth. So is there a difference in the tanning process between an African animal and say a deer? Is that something's most common?
It's pretty much the same. The only difference is the salt that they use over there in Africa and the process for drying it out. They often end up a bit more dried out than what I'd have over here. So they're a little bit harder to rehydrate. And the tanneries, they have these big vats and good quality rehydration chemicals, and they can get those softer.
Makes sense.
So growing up, I just think back because I was raised in hunting camps with the old school generation of guys and everything, and they would have the skins laid out, and then they would have the bucket of Morton salt, and they would just salt the whole back of that. And is that taboo? Don't do that. Just roll it up, freeze it, or bring it right to your taxidermist, or like how is that? Is that damaging? Or I hear mixed things on that.
There's nothing wrong with salting as long as you've processed your hide correctly. I think the average hunter doesn't know how to turn the ears inside out, doesn't know how to skin all the way down each toe. So if you don't do those items, then it's as if they're not salted. The salt can't penetrate the toes or the ears, then you're going to have hair slippage. So unless you actually know how to fully open up and turn all these things, it's best to bring it to the taxidermist.
Got it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Gotcha.
So now for us coming into hunting season and all that, or in trapping as well, what's your number one advice, to give to the hunters in the field of how to care for their animal? Obviously short of don't drag it until all the fur comes off.
Yeah.
What would be your best advice to give to people out there?
My best advice would be to keep the hide dry. Don't let it soak in a cooler of water. Don't let it, stay at room temp any longer than you have to. And get it in a freezer as soon as you can. Definitely don't drag it around in a cooler for 2 weeks, which is what some of these people have done. And we pull out the hide and it's just green all over. So treat your hide like you would treat your meat. If your meat would go bad, then your hide would too. So if you wouldn't eat it in those conditions, don't put your hide through it.
Nice.
Do you have a favorite, like I'm talking whitetails here, do you have a favorite pose, and what is probably the most common pose that you see people pick?
The most common pose would be a semi-sneak. That's right in the middle of the two extremes, with the sneak being fully stretched out and the upright being, very alert. I find somewhere in the middle to be the most classic, and that's what people seem to like. And
That's what that one is.
I feel like it shows off the neck the best too. You don't want it too alert, nor do you want to totally stretch it out. That can kind of make the neck look skinny, and everybody wants the neck to look really big.
Oh yeah.
Rutting whitetail.
So the when it comes to the antlers and the skull plate, are you putting the skull plate in the mount or are you screwing just the antlers to it? How does that work?
Yeah, a piece of the actual skull goes in the mount. So when I finish skinning out the deer, I take a hacksaw and I make 2 cuts, and that leaves a little piece of skull cap attached to the antlers. The only time we'd be doing antlers only would be if we were working with sheds. Then they sell replacement plates that have like 2 pins that come out. It's a lot of extra work to attach the sheds down to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my uncle shot a red stag in Argentina, and we have 2 of them, and the antlers come out. So like because it's so big, obviously to move it. So like is that like really hard to do because they have like these weird square pegs, and it almost seems like fake, but it's real. But and then you put it up and you got to try to fit the antler in there,
Yeah.
I
and
do
it's a
that
pain
on
in the
moose a
butt.
lot. You really want to do that on moose, at least one of the antlers, if not both. But that's called detachable pins, and that's exactly what that is. It's just square stock, male and female part, so that you can take it off, which is great for transportation and hanging them up on the wall. But it's a lot of extra work and generally going to be a upcharge from the taxidermist.
Okay.
Okay.
I've
That's why some
actually
people just do one. If you just take one antler off, you'll generally be able to weave it through a standard doorway. But yeah,
okay.
if you don't have double doors in your house, make sure that you can get your dream mount in through your single door, or you might have to cut a double door.
Yeah.
Word of advice heard. So take notes, Amy, for when and if I get a moose to remind me.
That's one of those hidden charges, Paul. You get the taxidermy
yeah.
home and can't get it in the
Yeah,
house.
we gotta add
Yeah.
that. We gotta go back and
Sideways.
add that.
Both ways for
Pivot.
me. So it's more work for me to make the detachable antlers, but once I finally do it, then I can mount this moose without the antlers on it at all. Does make
Yeah.
it a lot easier during the mounting process. You can do the whole thing and then pop the antlers back.
Pivot.
I'm asking for a friend, not me, a friend. Um, if you happen to put the wrong antlers on the wrong animal, what's the best advice to get them out?
Sounds like a story here.
Oh, well, that would be easy too. We talked earlier about, rehydrating hides and resoftening them. You would just do it to the very top of the head and then be able to unscrew the antlers and pop that skull plate off.
And then you could just sew back.
Yeah, just do
right.
a little area that you had to undo. Sometimes people want me to put new antlers on an older mount. Anything's possible really, as long as the hide is in.
Yeah. Here's a weird question for you. I've seen some of the new things that I saw taxidermists doing this. It's like if you have shed antlers, you can buy these magnetic receptacles that you can they magnetize to the skull somehow. So they're all magnetic. You can take them off and on.
That's pretty cool. I haven't tried that. I'm intrigued. I have a hard time imagining it would be strong enough, but
well, they're using
magnets.
they use rare earth magnets and they're like crazy strong. So yeah.
I'm gonna have to try that. I definitely like the idea. That does sound a lot easier than dealing with the pins.
Makes sense.
And you can also buy just the deer mounted with the magnet holes, and they sell you the magnets. So you could buy the deer. It's like, $400, $500. And then so if you find sheds or whatever, you could just put the magnets on and pop them on.
That wouldn't be good for taxidermists. You get one deer mounted and then you get antlers on every
pop. Check out this deer, Troy. Now check out this one.
What's a normal schedule look like for you? Like, how many hours are you in the shop?
Usually I'm in the shop at about 7:30 and I'll work till 5 o'clock. Sometimes later and sometimes less if I have my kids and we have some obligation. But typically try to work about 9 hours a day.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're keeping her past her deadline of hours. So we're gracious for your time here.
Okay.
I got a question about the more of the shows and like the when you go out for like best taxidermy and you do different the best that you can do and bring out there. When you go to these shows and these competitions, is it usually someone donating an animal to you to do that? And then you get to choose if you want to do that or not? Or do you source someone and say, hey, I really want to do a mountain lion? Like, who can get me a mountain lion? Like, how does that exactly work? Or do you just deal with what you get?
Usually I'll choose an animal that I want to mount for my shop. A lot of hours go into these competition pieces. There's crazy details you have to put in that you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you didn't know what you were looking for. But if I'm going to put 100 hours in something, I want to be able to keep it. So it's always been an animal for me, and I will source whatever animal that I want. There's groups called Trapper to Taxidermist on Facebook, and you can pretty much find any animal you want. As long as it's something that's legal to sell, I can find it.
Wolverine? Have you seen a Wolverine?
I have a Wolverine hide I'm going to be doing for myself pretty soon. Yeah.
Nice.
Wolverine are easy to get. They're a little pricey. You can easily spend $500 to $800 on a hide, but you can get them.
Is there anything you haven't done that you really, really want to?
Let me think, because if you'd asked me that just a couple months ago, I would have said a leopard, but a taxidermist donated a leopard hide to my shop, and I recently put that together. So I got to do my very first leopard. So at this point, I'm kind of waiting for the call that I know I'll get one day from the zoo saying that maybe a baby zebra has passed. I don't want a baby zebra to die, but if it is so unfortunate as to happen, I think that would be a cool addition to the collection since I already have a baby giraffe.
So is that like when you say to add to the collection, do you have, so you have like your showroom, obviously like most taxidermists probably have, and those are just staying there at your shop that people can kind of see what your work looks like and stuff whenever they come in, or what?
Yeah. I kind of basically have a little museum, and it kind of goes beyond just my taxidermy business and promotion of the business. I like showing kids the museum and showing it to people that, even if they don't, really have intentions to be a client in the future. I just like showing it off. So yeah, you could say I have a whole museum going, and it's growing. I need to add on.
You aren't like wireless. We can get kind of a mini tour or something, are you? Could you like?
Yeah, I could actually. I'm on my.
Is that possible?
Yeah, you want to take a look?
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
I wanted to ask, but then I was just like,
That's giraffe.
Oh, I see a Gemsbuck.
All right, so you're about to see.
Holy cow.
Wow.
This is kind of the crowded corner.
Yeah,
There's
it's
a lot of
crazy.
things on the floor right now.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
there's-
unbelievable.
That
We know
leopard
that
is insane.
everyone, obviously just listening to this podcast can't see what we can see, but it's pretty amazing.
They'll get to see it
it's
on
fun.
YouTube, right, Paul? Like, can
All
YouTube
right.
this later?
Yeah, it's going to be up on YouTube as well.
I've got two wolves here. I've
Oh
got
my
three different-
gosh.
That
three different
sable.
species of porcupines.
What's your most proud mount that you have there?
I would say probably my leopard.
Look at
Wow.
the beaver.
I was about to say she was gonna say the beaver.
Where's-
This is area for customer mounts that are drying.
That's cool.
awesome.
And down
It's
here,
like
lots of African mounts that are getting ready to go home.
Look at that wildebeest. Oh my
I
gosh.
saw it on the floor down there.
Yeah.
Do you
The
have
Gims-
any
Wow.
like big pieces that you've done that are possibly like in museums or anything like that that you could tell people about that they could see if they're in certain?
I don't know if
CDs
any
or
of my
anything?
work is in museums yet, but it's my intention one day when when my time here is done, I would like to see some of my more rare items like the giraffes end up in a museum. That's what I would hope for.
That's awesome.
That leopard's sweet. I just gotta reiterate that. That's freaking cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
The diversity in that shot, just you walking back there was like that. That's phenomenal. I mean, my wife and I have a daughter going into high school, and so if she can take away anything from this conversation, I hope she watches this when it comes out and Paul releases it, because having a female like you in the industry doing amazing things that you are, I mean, you need a TV show, really do.
I do have my own YouTube channel where I do taxidermy videos.
That's
What
very cool.
Say the name of it and
Channel,
everything.
let's promote it.
Yeah. On YouTube, it's Amy's Animal Art.
Awesome.
Okay.
That up. I try to focus on more unique things. There's a million videos out there on working on a deer head and stuff like that. So these are going to be videos that show things like porcupines and beavers and giraffes. And I think people enjoy seeing that more rare stuff.
Has anyone ever brought an animal in and you were just like you took it in, but then you had to sit back and like really figure out how to do it? Like, what was the most challenging mount?
I mean, definitely these hides that come in that are just in pieces,
Okay.
Some people will just about cut their animal in half. One guy pelted his fox out just for a pelt, cut the legs off, and then regretted that decision. So he brought me the fox with 4 legs cut off, and I
Here.
So
Wow. Wow. What
then
would you
once
say?
I wanted a bear rug, and he also cut the paws off, and I said, "You are not going to want to invest this much money and not even have the claws." So
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah.
What would you say to a young kid that wants to work either in your field or the outdoor industry, or somebody with a dream? What would you say to inspire them? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, you know, it's a very enjoyable field. You'll get to work with animals that a lot of people never ever even get to see in person or even know existed. But it's a lot of work, and you know, a lot of work to get to the level of quality taxidermy where you can get paid fairly for your work. So just be prepared to put in the hours. Like anything in life, you know, all good things don't immediately come quickly.
Well said.
Well said. Very much so. Well, Amy, any questions for us before we wrap it up here? I don't want to keep you longer than you're supposed to here at night, but we can't thank you. So
No,
you got
I think that's it. But thank you very much for having me. This was a pleasure.
awesome. It was for us as well. We're gonna be here rolling probably end of the week. We'll be able to put it up on live on YouTube on our channel and also through Buzzsprout, which goes on Spotify, Apple podcasts, and all the other big ones out there. In the show notes, we'll have all your links to your Facebook, your YouTube, your website, and all that to promote you through there. And once again, we're huge fans of yours and your work. You do phenomenal work, and I live up in Virginia, so my wife and I and kids will definitely drive down. We get something nice and bring it to you to do for us. So to look
Awesome.
forward to that.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Well, this is the Bowmen signing off. Thank you, Amy. And